Welcome to this lecture about modal verbs, which is the main part of this lecture. But just because it is so similar to English, so you should understand the logic even if you're not much interested in grammatic or grammar. I have also included some expression which you should be familiar with in Norwegian, even at the basic level. But first, the main part here, which you should be familiar with in present tense, it's the modal verbs. So if we just look at the modal verbs, which we have, these are irregular, so you don't need to think so much about the infinitive. At this level, we are going to use the present tense, which is kan, vil, skal, må, bør. The equivalent in English is can, which is direct translation. Will, skal, shall, må, must, bør, ought to. I could just mention you shouldn't think too much right now, but there is slight difference in meaning of will and skal in Norwegian compared to English. Will can also mean want to. Skal will is more of a fixed plan with someone who main character who has a fixed plan. Må, particularly in past tense, this will be different in Norwegian as opposed to English, as we don't use have to, had to. In these cases you have to use this verb må or måtte, må in present tense, and then ought to, should. This would be particularly in past tense, should do something. Bør, it's the one we use in Norwegian. So they're quite similar, but there is some small differences, but which you will be used to when we get along. Today, if you're not familiar with how to use the modal verbs, this is what you should just focus on now. So if I show here by example, hun ønsker å spise is. Directly translated, she wishes to eat ice cream. So, because the verb is ønsker, you don't see it over here, it's all the other verbs, not modal verbs. You will have to use the infinitive form å spise. Same as in English, wishes or to wish. It's not a modal verb, so the next verb will be infinitive form with the to. If you in Norwegian, this would have the same meaning. Hun vil spise is. Vil, it's one of the modal verbs, so spise becomes without the å. But you will still have the infinitive form. She will eat ice cream, the same as in English. Will, it's a modal verb in English, so you have eat without the to. So, and this is just you have to memorize. Always, it's always like this. Modal verbs, if you have two verbs after each other, the first could be in present tense or past tense or whatever. The second one would be in the infinitive, but usually with å. In the modal verbs phrases, you will use infinitive without the å or without to, as in English. Yeah. So here you will see some phrases with modal verbs, and then when expressing with modal verbs vil, skal, må, and the verbs gå, dra, reise, you can leave out the verbs, but this is completely optional. It doesn't really make your phrase much better. I can make it shorter, which can be practical, but just be aware when you read these phrases if it seems to be missing a verb. So, hun vil dra til Kina på ferie. This can mean two things. She's going to, or she want to. In Norwegian, this is a bit problem with the verb vil. It doesn't create exactly the distinction. It's based on context. But then you see the second verb, dra or dra, which you should be familiar with, is to go. It can be for short distances or long distances. So it is a very practical verb for going someplace. To China on vacation. Hun vil til Kina på ferie. You leave out the dra. It's completely optional. These phrases are completely the same. Yeah, just be aware if you see these kind of phrases and you feel like something is missing here because it's just the modal verb alone. It's not necessarily. It's probably one of these verbs. Han skal gå til legen I morgen. He shall go to the doctor tomorrow. Han skal til legen I morgen. The verb å gå, which mostly is used for actual walking or for shorter distances. Barnet må reise på skoletur. The child must travel on a school trip. The child must on a school trip. Yep. Again, å reise, it's optional, but you can have a habit of always including it. It's not, yeah, that's completely up to you. Just like in English also, you can express future. Modal verbs is primarily useful because it's expressing future action. We talked in the previous lecture about present tense. This is very good. Modal verbs is very good for future tense. For close or near future, you can of course use it also simply by using present tense. But then it is usually good to have like a time expression. For instance, han kommer I morgen. He comes tomorrow. So it is future, but you don't use modal verb. Jeg går på jobb klokka 7. I go to work at 7. Han besøker legen senere. He visits the doctor later. Yeah. So, particularly when you use time expression, you can use it for close future without the modal verbs, but when you're going to express future, modal verb, it's the most practical way of going. Yeah. So that was basically the part with the modal verbs. It's just like in English when you use a present tense and an infinitive. In English you use to plus the verb. In Norwegian you use or plus the verb, like it should. With the modal verbs in English you don't use the to, you just use the infinitive version. Same as in Norwegian. You don't use the or, you just use the infinitive version. So it's quite easy to just translate directly. Being aware that the modal verbs don't have the exact same meaning, but that is a little bit more for later. So, yeah. Here is some extra grammatical element we can just mention here. Whenever you say something is too slow, too early, too late, the equivalent in Norwegian is for. As I mentioned before, preposition, try to learn them as much and as early as possible. So, for langsom, and when for tidlig, too early, for sen, too late, å være presis, which in present tense would be han precis, he's on time or he's arriving at the appropriate time. Yeah. The second thing here, å ha lyst på. Yeah, which is very common to use. Lyst på plus noun if you want something. Lyst til if you want to do something. Han har lyst på kaffe. He wants coffee. Han har lyst til å spise. He wants to eat. More expression. This is can also be translated directly over to English, but there is some expression you don't have the same with. For instance, han reiser hjem, he goes home. Han hjemme, he is at home. So you see all of these in the first line. This is movement. All in this line if it's stationary or you are at a place. Yeah. Han reiser hjem, he's going home. Han hjemme, he's at home. It's good to remember this hjemme just as at home because it's a very common to use. Han går ut, he goes out. Han ute, he is outside. This out here is just to show how it works in Norwegian as opposed to English. If you were to use the car is outside of the garage, then you would use a different one. So it's not directly translation here. It's just to show the grammar, follow the same logic. Bilen utenfor garasjen would be the car is outside of the garage. So then if you actually want to emphasize something is outside something else, you would use a different word. But in this context, just think of going out. Han går ut, movement. Han ute, he's outside. Same. Han går inn, he's going in. Han inne, he's inside. Han går opp, he's going up. Han oppe, he's upstairs or up someplace. Han går ned, he's going down. Han nede, he's downstairs. Han kommer hit, movement, he's coming here. He is here. You see, as here you have English, we use the same, but also for these in Norwegian we have separate. Vi reiser dit, we're going there. De der, they are there. So just to show, for instance, illustrate the difference. If we take a phrase, han løper hjem, or han løper hjemme. Han løper hjem, he is someplace else and he's running home. Han løper hjemme means he is at home running. So he is at the home the whole time. Just activity he's doing is running. So this is how to understand the difference between these two. Yeah. So in this short text we will use the modal verbs and regular verbs. So I will read this first page first. I kveld skal Erik reise hjem. Han vil besøke familien sin som der hjemme. Han pakker bagasjen, og han skal snart ha taxi til flyplassen. Han vil ikke komme for sent til flyet. Han kommer tidlig på flyplassen og går på en kafé for å spise lunsj. So, this evening Eric is going home. So, if there was no verb in Russian, it would be Erik skal reise hjem. But of course here, you start with the time expression, so you have the verb moved forward, but the second verb stays where it was. Hjem, as you remember from earlier, when there's movement. He wishes to visit his family, which is there at home. So will, wishes to, or to visit. With will, it's a modal verb, so again without the o. This one you don't need to think about right now. It's a reflexive possessive pronoun. Don't need to think. Some, who, which is there at home. Yeah. Han pakker bagasjen, og han skal snart ta taxi til flyplassen. He packs his luggage and he shall soon take taxi to the airport. So, skal, modal verb, ta infinitive form. Adverb, soon, will be after the first verb. Han vil ikke komme for sent til flyet. Same here, modal verb, og komme without o. Modal, the adverb in the second location. As always in Norwegian. Then for sent, too late, to the airplane. Han kommer tidlig på flyplassen og går på en kafé for å spise lunsj. He comes early to or on the airport and goes to a cafe in order to eat lunch. Here, if it's easier for you, you could have used till here. It's gå på kafé in this preposition is very common to go på kafé, go på jobb, go to work. But it wouldn't be wrong to use till. This for or in order to. He goes to a cafe to eat lunch. In English, you just have a to. Here it actually becomes to if in Norwegian, if you were to translate directly. A rule of thumb is that if you have a noun and then the verb, you tend to have infinitive verb, then you tend to have a, but this is just a rule of thumb, it's not a good grammatical way of saying it, then you tend to have till or for, one of these prepositions. Till, if it's not directly linked, for, if you can translate it in order to. Se, han har tid til å gjøre det. He has time to do it. So here you will have till, because he has the time regardless, even if you don't do it or not, but he has the time to do it. So with time and money, han har penger til ny bil, he has money for a new car. That means he has the money regardless, it's not in order to get the new car. Here he's going to a cafe in order to eat lunch. Yeah. Again, this is just one of those small things. If you don't quite understand it now, just keep it back of your head until you meet this again, because you're going to meet it, but it's more later. This is a grammar element that even at intermediate level, people will have problem with. So just mention it, but if you don't understand it exactly now, don't worry too much about it right now. Ja. Servitør, ja. Kan jeg hjelpe deg? Jeg ser etter lunsj. Hva vil du ha? Jeg vil gjerne bestille meny nummer 3 med et glass cola. Ønsker du å spise her, eller skal du ta maten med deg? Jeg vil spise her. Da blir det 155 kroner. Can I help you? Yeah. Okay, sorry for those who it's obvious, but I will repeat it again. Regular phrase would be jeg kan hjelpe deg. But to create a question here, you have to move the verb at the beginning, but the second verb stays the same place. I'm looking for lunch. What do you want? Will, again, will has been moved, so ha, it's modal. Will modal verbs, ha without infinitive, without the o, but in infinitive. Jeg vil gjerne bestille meny nummer 3 med et glass cola. I would really like to order. Gjerne, adverb in second location. Do you wish to eat here, or are you going to bring the food with you? Ønsker. First verb, not a modal verb, so, or. Do you wish to eat here, or are you going to bring the food with you? I want or will eat here. modal verb, spise without infinitive, without å, sorry, it is in infinitive, but without the å. Da blir det 155 kroner. Then it becomes, or then it will be 155 kroner. Legen til Erik sier at han bør spise sunt, men når han er ute og reiser, så spiser han hva han vil. Han prøver å få lavere vekt enn 100 kilo, men det kommer ikke til å skje snart. Etter lunsjen går han for å vente på flyet. Han vil komme frem senere i dag. Erik's doctor, possessive, you might remember, legen til Erik, the doctor of Erik, says that he ought to eat healthy. Ought to eat healthy, bør. But when he is out and traveling, he eats what he wants. So then this so has many different meaning. With this kind of meaning of so, you have the verb inversion. He tries to get lower weight than 100 kilo. This is comparative, lower weight. Again, this is really later grammar, will not do much now. But then in comparative, you will use n for then. But it's not going to happen soon. It's not, Etter lunsjen går han for å vente på flyet. After lunch he goes to wait for the airplane. Han vil komme frem senere i dag. He will get there later today. Frem, it's kind of just literally means forward, but it also means to the location. It's used in this context in Norwegian also. Okay, so this expression was not what's the most well, it is thing I just mentioned because you are going to have to use it later. Modal verbs was the main part here, and as you recognize, it's basically just for now. If you just think of the modal verbs having more or less the same meaning as in English, they follow the same structure. When you use the to infinitive in English, you use å in Norwegian. If you omit the to it, for instance, in English, you will omit the å in Norwegian. I think that's the main part to take from this lecture. So, hopefully you have tasks or some task book to look more of those to train with this. Thank you and see you in lecture 8.